Sarah Mitchell sat at her dual-monitor editing station in her home office, working through photos from last Saturday's wedding at Ashford Estate, one of Charleston's most prestigious wedding venues. It was Tuesday evening, and she was on schedule. She typically delivered edited wedding photos within 2 weeks of the event. The Henderson Price wedding had been beautiful, classic Southern elegance with Spanish moss, magnolias, and sunset photos on the venue's waterfront terrace. The couple was lovely, the weather perfect, the details exquisite. Sarah had shot over 1,200 photos during the 8-hour event and was now selecting and editing the best 400-500 for the final gallery. At 34, Sarah had been photographing weddings for 9 years. She loved her work, capturing joy, love and celebration, creating images that couples would treasure forever. Each wedding was unique, each couple special, each day filled with beautiful moments. Sarah was working on the ceremony photos, adjusting exposure and color on a shot of the bride and groom exchanging vows. The couple was in sharp focus in the center of the frame. The officiant, bridesmaids and groomsmen were visible. Guests filled the chairs. Everything looked perfect. But as Sarah zoomed in to check sharpness, she noticed something in the background she hadn't seen when shooting. In the window of the main house behind the ceremony area, barely visible through the glass and curtains, was a face. A young woman with dark hair, partially obscured, looking out at the ceremony. That was odd. The venue staff were supposed to stay out of sight during ceremonies. Sarah zoomed in further. The woman's face showed an expression that didn't match the joyful ceremony. She looked frightened, or maybe desperate. It was hard to tell with the window reflection and distance, but something about her expression was unsettling. Sarah flagged the photo to remind herself to clone out the figure in the background. Couples didn't want random people visible in their wedding photos. She continued editing, moving to the next image. The next ceremony photo showed the couple's first kiss. Beautiful moment, perfect composition, but again, Sarah's eye caught something in the background. This time on a second-floor balcony of the main house, a figure in white, partially hidden by the decorative ironwork, looking down at the ceremony. Sarah zoomed in. It was the same woman, or someone who looked very similar. Dark hair, pale face, wearing what looked like a white dress or nightgown, and that same expression, fear. The image was grainy when zoomed in this far, but the woman's body language suggested she was trying to get someone's attention while staying mostly hidden. This was getting weird. Sarah continued through the ceremony photos. In several more shots, the woman appeared, always in the background, always partially concealed behind curtains, in doorways on balconies, always wearing white, always with that disturbing expression. Sarah moved to the cocktail hour photos. The reception was held on the venue's grand terrace, overlooking the river. Guests mingled, sipped champagne, enjoyed hors d'oeuvres. The golden hour light was gorgeous. Sarah had captured beautiful candid moments, but in multiple photos. In the windows of the main house visible behind the terrace, the woman in white appeared again. Sometimes just a face in a window, sometimes a figure standing behind curtains, always watching, always hidden, always looking distressed. Sarah felt increasingly uneasy. Who was this woman? Why did she appear in so many photos? Why was she wearing white bride's color, very inappropriate for anyone else at a wedding? Why did she look scared? Sarah opened a photo from the reception dinner, the couple's first dance, surrounded by guests holding sparklers. Romantic, magical, perfect. And in the background, through a window of the main house, the woman in white again, her face pressed close to the glass, one hand raised as if trying to get attention. Sarah zoomed in as far as the image resolution allowed. The woman was Asian, maybe early 20s, with long dark hair. Her mouth was open as if she was shouting or crying, and on her wrist, Sarah enlarged the image further. Adjusting sharpness, was that bruising or restraints? Sarah's blood ran cold. She went back through all the photos, systematically looking at backgrounds rather than focal points. In 27 different images spanning the entire 8-hour event, the woman in white appeared somewhere in the background of the frame, sometimes barely visible, sometimes more prominent, always partially hidden, always watching the wedding, always looking terrified. This wasn't a staff member or guest who'd accidentally wandered into shots. This was someone who was trying to be seen, trying to get attention, trying to signal for help, but doing it carefully, as if afraid of being caught. Sarah checked the metadata on the photos. The shots were taken throughout the event from 4 p.m. to midnight. The woman appeared consistently over those 8 hours, in different windows and locations throughout the main house. Someone was being held in that building during the wedding. Someone who was trying to signal distress to the outside world, hoping someone at the celebration would notice her. Sarah grabbed her phone and called Detective Lisa Park at Charleston Police Department. Sarah had worked with Detective Park before on a case where Sarah's photos had helped identify a theft suspect at a venue. They'd stayed in touch professionally. Detective Park, this is Sarah Mitchell, the wedding photographer. I need to report something urgent. I think someone might be being held against their will at Ashford Estate. Ashford Estate, the luxury wedding venue. What makes you think that? Sarah explained about the woman appearing in the background of 27 wedding photos over 8 hours, always partially hidden, always looking distressed, with what might be restraints on her wrists. I'm sending you the photos now, Sarah said, already uploading selected images to a secure file transfer. Look at the backgrounds, not the couple. There's a woman in white in windows and on balconies throughout the venue. She's trying to get attention without being obvious about it. I think she's asking for help. Detective Park was silent for a moment after opening the images. Then Sarah, I see what you're seeing. That woman definitely looks distressed. And you're right, those look like restraints on her wrists. How many people have access to the main house during events? I don't know. I've shot 3 weddings at Ashford Estate. It's a beautiful historic property with a plantation-style main house that's part of the venue. I thought it was just offices and storage, not actively used during events. Guests only access the terrace and gardens, not the house interior. Who owns the venue? Richard Ashford. He inherited the property from his family and converted it to a wedding venue about 10 years ago. He's very involved. He's often on site during events, coordinating with vendors. I'm going to make some calls, Detective Park said. In the meantime, send me all 27 images where this woman appears, and send me the full set of photos from that wedding. We may need to examine other details. And Sarah, excellent catch. If this is what it looks like, you may have just found someone who desperately needs rescue. Detective Lisa Park immediately contacted FBI Special Agent Marcus Rodriguez from the Charleston Field Office. If someone was being held at a luxury wedding venue, this could potentially be human trafficking, a federal crime requiring FBI resources. We have a photographer who noticed a young woman appearing in the background of multiple wedding photos taken at Ashford Estate, Park briefed Rodriguez. The woman appears distressed, possibly restrained, and seems to be trying to signal for help without being obvious. She appears in 27 photos over an 8-hour period, always in the main house, always partially hidden. Rodriguez pulled up the images Sarah had sent. His trained eye immediately caught details. The woman is Asian, early 20s. She's wearing what looks like a white nightgown or dress, not street clothes. The restraints on her wrists are visible in several photos. Her facial expression and body language indicate fear and desperation. She's positioned herself to be visible to wedding guests, but appears to be hiding from someone inside the house. Human trafficking, Park asked. That's my first thought. Ashford Estate, that's the high-end wedding venue on River Road. Yes, owned by Richard Ashford, local businessman from old Charling Money. The property has been in his family for generations. On the surface, Ashford appeared respectable, 52 years old, successful businessman, active in Charling society, regular donor to charities. But deeper investigation revealed some concerning patterns. Ashford traveled internationally frequently, especially to Southeast Asia. He'd been investigated twice for financial irregularities, but never charged. His venue employed mostly undocumented workers. There were rumors, never substantiated, about private parties held at the estate that were invite-only and involved concerning activities. We need to identify who this woman is and determine if she's being held against her will, Rodriguez said. But we have to be strategic. If this is trafficking, there may be more victims. If we move too quickly on just this one observation, we risk Ashford destroying evidence or moving victims before we can build a comprehensive case. So what's our approach? Park asked. We coordinate with the Human Trafficking Task Force, get surveillance on the property, try to identify the woman, and build evidence before we raid. We need to be thorough and careful. Over the next 48 hours, investigators took several steps. Surveillance. FBI agents established discreet surveillance of Ashford Estate from neighboring properties and public road vantage points. They documented regular activity in the main house during evening hours. Windows with blackout curtains, unusual for a historic property. Security cameras and fencing that seemed excessive for a wedding venue. Deliveries of food and supplies inconsistent with just venue operations. People, mostly men, arriving for what appeared to be private events, separate from weddings. Background investigation. Deeper research into Richard Ashford revealed international business connections including import-export companies, financial transactions with known human trafficking networks, flagged by Treasury Department. Complaints from former employees about strange restrictions at the estate, never investigated thoroughly. Victim identification. Using facial recognition technology on the woman in Sarah's photos, investigators ran the images through databases of missing persons and trafficking victims. They got a hit. The woman was Mei Chen, age 22, originally from Guangzhou, China. She'd been reported missing by her cousin 6 months ago after coming to the US on what she'd been told was a work visa for a hospitality job. The cousin had received one message from Mei saying she'd arrived safely, then nothing. This is definitely trafficking, Rodriguez told his team. Mei Chen was lured here with false promises of legitimate work, then disappeared. Now she's appearing in wedding photos at Richard Ashford's estate, looking terrified and restrained. We need to get her out and find out how many others are being held there. FBI agent Rodriguez called an emergency meeting of the Charleston Human Trafficking Task Force, a coordinated group including FBI, local police, IC, focusing on victim assistance, not enforcement, Department of Homeland Security, and social services agencies. We have strong evidence that Richard Ashford is operating a trafficking network out of Ashford Estate, Rodriguez briefed the assembled team. A wedding photographer noticed a victim trying to signal for help in the background of wedding photos. We've identified her as Mei Chen, a Chinese national who went missing 6 months ago after coming to the US for what she thought was a legitimate job. Rodriguez displayed Sarah's photos on a large screen. The image of Mei pressed against a window, mouth open in what looked like a silent scream, hand raised showing restraints, made several team members visibly emotional. How did a photographer notice this when guests at the wedding didn't? Asked DHS agent Jennifer Martinez. Good question, Rodriguez said. The photographer Sarah Mitchell was editing photos on her computer and was looking at the entire frame, not just the focal subject. She zoomed in to check image sharpness and noticed this figure in the background. Wedding guests would have been focused on the ceremony and celebration, not looking carefully at windows in a building behind them. Mei was clever. She positioned herself to be captured in photographs without being obvious enough that Ashford or his associates would notice her signaling. What's our evidence so far? Asked Detective Park. Rodriguez outlined what they'd gathered. 27 photos showing Mei trying to signal for help. Surveillance showing suspicious activity at the estate. Financial evidence linking Ashford to trafficking networks. Mei's missing person report. Background showing Ashford's pattern of international travel to source countries for trafficking. We need to raid the estate, but we have to do it carefully, Rodriguez said. If there are multiple victims being held there, we need to rescue all of them safely. If there's evidence of a larger network, we need to secure it before it can be destroyed. And we need to do this in a way that doesn't endanger victims. The task force developed an operation plan. Timing: execute the raid during a scheduled wedding event when Ashford and his staff would be distracted and more doors would be open for vendors. This would give agents access to the property with reasonable cover and ensure Ashford was on site. Coordination: FBI hostage rescue team would lead the tactical entry, backed by local SWAT. Victim specialists would be on site to provide trauma-informed care for anyone rescued. Medical teams would stand by. Legal: federal search warrants were obtained for the entire Ashford Estate property, all buildings, Ashford's personal residence, his vehicle, and his electronic devices. Victims' plans were made to provide immediate care for victims, medical examinations, safe housing, legal status assistance, trauma counseling, and connection to long-term services. The raid was scheduled for Saturday, 5 days after Sarah had noticed Mei in the wedding photos. There was a large wedding booked at Ashford Estate that day, providing cover for the operation. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell was asked to photograph the Saturday wedding as planned. Her presence would be normal and wouldn't alert Ashford that anything was wrong. She was briefed on the operation and sworn to secrecy. You need to shoot the wedding as you normally would, Rodriguez told Sarah. But we'd like you to take specific photos of the main house exterior, all windows, all doors, any security features you can see. This will help our tactical teams plan entry points. And if you see Mei or anyone else who appears to be in distress, signal our undercover agents, who'll be positioned as catering staff. Sarah was nervous but determined. I want to help. What Mei must have gone through, hoping someone would notice her in my photos. I'm grateful I saw her. Let's make sure we get her out safely. Saturday arrived sunny and warm, perfect weather for the Mitchell O'Brien wedding at Ashford Estate. The venue looked beautiful, decorated with white roses and greenery. Guests began arriving at 4 p.m. for a 5 p.m. ceremony. Sarah arrived at 2 p.m. to photograph detail shots and venue prep. As was her standard practice, she was acutely aware of FBI agents positioned as catering staff, florists, and even a supposed assistant photographer. Richard Ashford greeted her warmly, having no idea his operation was about to be dismantled. "Wonderful to see you again, Sarah," Ashford said, the picture of Southern charm. "We're so glad the Mitchells chose you as their photographer. You do beautiful work." Sarah forced a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford. It's always a pleasure to shoot here. Your property is stunning." As Sarah photographed venue details, floral arrangements, place settings, the terrace setup, she also carefully documented the main house as instructed. Windows, doors, security cameras, the layout. Information that would help tactical teams coordinate their entry. At 4:45 p.m. as guests were being seated for the ceremony, Sarah received a text from Agent Rodriguez. "Go time. Continue shooting the wedding. Stay out of the main house. We'll handle it." While guests focused on the ceremony about to begin, FBI hostage rescue team members in tactical gear quietly surrounded Ashford Estate. Local police secured the perimeter, blocking roads to prevent anyone from fleeing. Undercover agents already on site moved into position. At exactly 5 p.m., as the bride began walking down the aisle, FBI agents executed the raid on the main house. FBI, search warrant, everyone down on the ground. Richard Ashford, standing near the ceremony area supervising venue operations, realized immediately what was happening. He tried to run but was tackled by undercover agents and handcuffed before he made it 10 feet. "What is this?" Ashford shouted. "I haven't done anything. This is outrageous." "Richard Ashford, you're under arrest for human trafficking, false imprisonment, and conspiracy," Agent Rodriguez said, reading him his rights. The wedding guests were confused and alarmed by the sudden law enforcement presence, but agents quickly explained there was an emergency situation unrelated to the wedding and asked everyone to remain calm. Meanwhile, FBI teams breached the main house from multiple entry points. What they found was even worse than they'd anticipated. In the second floor of the house, agents found a locked hallway with 6 bedrooms. Each bedroom had a heavy lock on the outside. Inside the rooms were young women, 7 total, in various states of distress and malnutrition. Mei Chen was in the second room. When agents opened the door, she collapsed in relief, crying and speaking in Mandarin. An agent who spoke Mandarin told her, "You're safe now. We're police. We're here to help you. You're not in trouble. You're going to be okay." Mei, through tears, said in broken English, "I tried to show in photos. At the wedding, I hoped someone would see me. I tried to be in the windows when people with cameras were there. Someone did see you," the agent told her. "The photographer saw you and called us. You're safe now." The other 6 women were from various countries, 2 from Vietnam, 2 from Thailand, 1 from the Philippines, 1 from Honduras. All had been trafficked to the US under false pretenses of legitimate jobs, then imprisoned at Ashford Estate. The conditions in which they'd been held were horrific. Locked rooms with minimal furniture, inadequate food and water, 1 bathroom shared among all 7 women, no access to outside world, no phones, no computers, no way to communicate, forced to provide sexual services during private parties. Ashford hosted, threatened with deportation or violence if they tried to escape. "We've been here for months," one woman told investigators through a translator. "Some of us for over a year. Mr. Ashford brings men here for parties. He makes us service them. We're locked in our rooms when there are weddings, so guests don't know we're here." But Mei had a room with a window facing the ceremony area. She would try to get in the windows during weddings, hoping someone would notice her. Investigators found extensive evidence in the main house. There were traffickings who'd paid to assault the women, financial transactions showing the trafficking operations' profits, communications with traffickers in source countries, video surveillance footage of the abuse, passports and documents belonging to the victims, which Ashford had confiscated. This was a sophisticated trafficking operation disguised by a legitimate wedding venue, Rodriguez told his team. Ashford used the venue as cover. Who would suspect a prestigious southern estate hosting elegant weddings was also a site of horrific human trafficking. The wedding business provided legitimate income and a respectable facade, while the trafficking happened out of sight in the main house. All 7 women were immediately taken to a secure facility where they received medical care, trauma counseling, and began the process of recovery and legal assistance. Richard Ashford was charged with 7 counts of human trafficking, 7 counts of false imprisonment, forced labor, forced labor, sex trafficking, conspiracy to commit human trafficking, money laundering, immigration violations, organized crime violations. He faced life in federal prison if convicted on all counts. Over the following days, Mei Chen provided detailed statements to investigators, describing how she'd been trafficked and her desperate attempts to signal for help. Mei had been living in Guangzhou, China, working in a hotel when she was approached by a woman who said she worked for an American
American hospitality company. The woman offered May a job in the United States as a hotel manager, with a good salary and the opportunity to eventually bring her family to America. She showed me official-looking documents, May told investigators through a Mandarin interpreter. Work visa papers, employment contract, company information. It seemed legitimate. My family is poor. I wanted to help them. The opportunity seemed too good to pass up. The woman arranged May's travel to the US, saying the company would cover the costs which May would pay back through payroll deductions. May arrived in Charleston 6 months ago, expecting to start work at a hotel. Instead, she was picked up at the airport by Richard Ashford's associate, taken to Ashford Estate, and told the job had changed. She would be working as private entertainment for wealthy clients. Her passport was confiscated. She was locked in a room and told if she didn't cooperate, or if she tried to escape, her family in China would be killed. I was terrified, May said. I had no phone, no way to contact anyone. I didn't know where I was. I barely spoke English. I was completely trapped. For 6 months, May and the other women were held at the estate, forced to provide sexual services during parties Ashford hosted for clients. Between parties, they were locked in their rooms. When there were weddings at the venue, the women were kept locked away, so guests wouldn't know they were there. But I had a room on the second floor, with a window facing where weddings had ceremonies, May explained. When I heard wedding music, I would go to the window and try to be seen. I couldn't yell or wave, obviously because Mr. Ashford or his men would see me and punish me, but I thought maybe if I appeared in photographs, someone would notice. I tried to look scared, to show my wrists where I had marks from restraints, to signal I needed help. May had done this at multiple weddings over the months, hoping desperately that someone would notice her in wedding photos, and realize she was asking for help. I knew it was a long shot, May said. Guests at weddings are focused on the celebration, not on windows in background, and even if I appeared in photos, would anyone notice? Would they think I was just a staff member? Would they care? I didn't know, but it was the only way I could think of to try to get help without Ashford knowing I was trying. Sarah Mitchell's sharp eye and attention to detail while editing had finally made May's desperate strategy work. After multiple weddings where May had tried to signal, Sarah had finally noticed her, realized something was wrong, and called police. The photographer saved my life, May said, crying. I was running out of hope. I didn't know how much longer I could survive in that place, but she saw me in the photos. She noticed me. She cared enough to report it. Because of her, I'm free. Because of her, all 7 of us are free. The 6 other women rescued from Ashford Estate each had similar stories of deception, trafficking, and imprisonment. Lin Nguyen, age 24, from Vietnam, promised a job as a seamstress in the US. Lin had been trafficked 11 months ago. She'd been held at Ashford Estate the entire time, forced into prostitution, with no contact with her family, who believed she was working successfully in America. Somsri Patel, age 20, from Thailand, lured with promises of work as a nanny for a wealthy American family. Somsri had been imprisoned for 14 months. She'd repeatedly tried to escape, but was caught each time, and punished severely. Carmen Rodriguez, age 23, from Honduras, recruited for supposed restaurant work. Carmen had been at Ashford Estate for 8 months. She spoke Spanish but very limited English, making it even harder for her to seek help or understand what was happening to her. Nina Reyes, age 22, from the Philippines, promised work as a medical assistant. Nina had been held for 6 months. She'd tried to signal to wedding guests during outdoor ceremonies, but no one had noticed or responded. Lan Pham, age 25, from Vietnam, brought to the US for supposed office work. Lan had been imprisoned for over a year, longer than any other victim currently at the estate. She'd seen other victims come and go, either moved to other locations or, in at least one case, Lan suspected, killed when they became too much trouble. Prika Singh, age 21, from Thailand, recruited for hospitality work. Prika had been at the estate for 9 months. She'd become severely depressed and had attempted suicide twice, seeing no escape from her situation. All 7 women had experienced severe physical and sexual abuse, were malnourished and traumatized, and faced long roads to recovery. But they were alive and safe, rescued because one photographer had noticed something wrong in the background of wedding photos. Medical treatment. The women received comprehensive medical examinations revealing severe malnutrition and dehydration, untreated injuries from abuse, evidence of repeated sexual assault, signs of chronic stress and trauma, various infections from poor living conditions, psychological trauma, including PTSD, depression, anxiety. These women have been systematically brutalized, said Dr. Patricia Martinez, who conducted several of the medical examinations. They've been physically abused, sexually assaulted, starved, and psychologically tortured. The trauma is profound. With proper care and support, They can heal, but it will take significant time and resources. Legal status. All 7 women were in the US without valid legal status. Their traffickers had either brought them illegally, or their legitimate visas had expired while they were imprisoned. Normally this would result in deportation, but federal law provides special protections for trafficking victims. Each woman was eligible for a T visa, special immigration status for trafficking survivors who cooperate with law enforcement. The T visa would allow them to remain legally in the US for up to 4 years, receive work authorization, access public benefits and services, eventually apply for permanent residency, potentially bring family members to the US. T visas recognize that trafficking victims shouldn't be punished for immigration violations that resulted from being trafficked, explained immigration attorney Jennifer Park. These women were brought here through deception and held against their will. They're victims, not criminals. The T visa gives them a chance to rebuild their lives safely in the US. Psychological support. All 7 women began intensive trauma therapy with specialists in human trafficking recovery. The psychological challenges were immense. PTSD from the trafficking experience, depression and anxiety, difficulty trusting anyone after profound betrayal, shame and self-blame, common among trafficking survivors, fear that traffickers would retaliate. Recovery from trafficking trauma is a long process, explained Dr. Maria Santos, who worked with several of the survivors. These women experienced sustained abuse over months or years. They were completely controlled, repeatedly violated, cut off from all support. That creates complex trauma that takes extensive therapy to process. But recovery is possible. With proper support, survivors can heal and build meaningful lives.
Sarah Mitchell found herself processing an experience she never could have anticipated when she set out to photograph a wedding 9 days ago. "I was just doing my job," Sarah told FBI agent Rodriguez when he interviewed her after the raid. "Editing wedding photos like I've done hundreds of times. But this time, I happened to notice something in the background. If I'd been less thorough in my editing, if I'd focused only on the couple and not examined the full frame, I might have missed May completely." Sarah thought about how close she'd come to not seeing May. If Sarah had been rushing through edits, if she'd been less meticulous about checking image details, if she'd cropped photos differently, there were so many small factors that could have resulted in May remaining unnoticed and imprisoned. Photography is about seeing, Sarah reflected. Really seeing, not just looking. Most people look at a photo and see the obvious subject, the bride and groom, the kiss, the first dance. But there's always more in a frame if you look carefully. Context, background details, unexpected elements. I train myself to see the whole image, not just the focal point. That skill, that attention to comprehensive detail, is what allowed me to notice May. The experience changed how Sarah viewed her work. She'd always known photography could be powerful, capturing joy, preserving memories, documenting important moments. But she'd never imagined her photographs could save lives. May used weddings as an opportunity to try to signal for help, Sarah said. She knew there would be photographers and guests with cameras. She positioned herself to be captured in images, hoping someone would notice her later when reviewing photos. That's incredibly clever and brave. She couldn't yell or wave, obviously, without her captors noticing, but she could appear in backgrounds of photos, and maybe, just maybe, someone would see her and realize she needed help. Sarah spoke with victim advocates about May's strategy and how other trafficking victims might use similar tactics to signal distress. Traffickers often display victims in semi-public settings, explained anti-trafficking expert Dr. Jennifer Park. Hotels, restaurants, events, places where they're technically visible but the trafficker doesn't think anyone will notice or care. May being held at a wedding venue is unusual, but the principle is similar. She was there but hidden. She couldn't escape or openly call for help, but she could try to appear in photographs and hope someone would notice. This suggests photographers, event planners, venue staff, anyone working events where photos are taken, should be trained to watch for concerning signs, Sarah said. Someone who appears distressed in the background, someone who seems to be trying to get attention, someone who looks out of place or afraid. These could be trafficking victims trying to signal for help. Sarah worked with the National Human Trafficking Hotline to develop training materials for event industry professionals, photographers, videographers, venue staff, wedding planners, teaching them to recognize potential trafficking indicators and how to report concerns. The training materials used Sarah's photos of May with permission as examples, figure appearing in multiple photos over extended time, expression of fear or distress inconsistent with celebration, evidence of restraints or injuries, Clothing inappropriate for setting, May wearing nightgown during elegant wedding, body language suggesting person trying to get attention while remaining hidden. Event professionals see so much, the training emphasized. We're focused on making events beautiful and memorable, but we also need to be aware that sometimes people at or near our events are in danger. A few minutes of attention to concerning details could save someone's life. Sarah stayed in touch with May throughout her recovery, developing an unlikely but meaningful friendship. May called Sarah the angel who saw me when I was invisible. You weren't invisible, Sarah told May. You were brave and clever. You found a way to ask for help using the tools available to you. I just happened to be paying attention. Richard Ashford's prosecution was swift and comprehensive. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and federal prosecutors were determined to see him imprisoned for life. The case was built on multiple pillars of evidence. Victim testimony. All 7 women rescued from Ashford Estate provided detailed statements describing how they were recruited with false promises, how they were transported to the US, how their documents were confiscated, how they were imprisoned and controlled, how they were forced into prostitution, the physical and sexual abuse they endured, Richard Ashford's direct involvement in their exploitation. May Chen's testimony was particularly powerful. She described in detail how Ashford personally had overseen the operation, brought clients to the estate, threatened the women, and profited from their exploitation. Physical evidence. FBI agents had seized extensive evidence from the estate, run financial records showing payments from clients, communications with traffickers in source countries. Rindleichtel Moody, Rindleichel Date Patol and Woody, from the forted Efrid Soats, called it Bo Ithive, Shobi Kotiv Mind Rotode, Paul de Tovil, Paul de Kotiv Tien, Paul de Rindel Adafnot, Temendias Poth, Paul de Kfez, Tal. Her distressed appearance and desperate attempts to be noticed, evidence of restraints on her wrists, the systematic nature of her confinement. These photographs tell a story, prosecutor Jennifer Martinez explained to the grand jury. They show a young woman imprisoned in this building, appearing in window after window over 8 hours, trying desperately to signal that she needed help. These aren't accidental appearances. This is someone deliberately positioning herself to be photographed, hoping against hope that someone would notice her and save her. Witness testimony. Multiple witnesses corroborated the trafficking operation. Former employees who'd noticed suspicious activities but were too afraid to report. Neighbors who'd heard screams from the estate. Vendors who'd observed locked areas and restricted access. Financial investigators who'd traced money laundering. Electronic evidence. Ashford's computers and phones contained damning evidence. Corner melacrotic trottor, former Raubens, Pellermantorkels, Pastringtorkels Pauf, former Dorkrotstringer, Toms Pellermant, Tornio Toric Fat Penduloptis Torso, Pentodfire Pella Manchel Paub, Insoquitin and Tolly, Tirutinot Samstable Tundable. Ashford's defense strategy was to claim he'd been unaware of trafficking occurring at his property, that associates had operated the scheme without his knowledge. Richard Ashford is a respected Charleston businessman, his attorney argued. He owns a legitimate wedding venue. He was deceived by employees who were using part of his property for illegal activities without his knowledge. He's not a trafficker, he's a victim himself of employees who betrayed his trust. But the prosecution demolished this defense with evidence showing Ashford's direct, hands-on involvement. May testified for 2 full days, describing how Ashford personally had recruited her through his trafficking contacts, how he'd confiscated her passport when she arrived, how he'd locked her in the room, how he'd threatened her family, and how he'd personally brought clients to the estate. Mr. Ashford was not an innocent property owner, May testified, her voice shaking but determined. He was the person in charge. He controlled everything. He decided who came to the parties. He collected the money. He threatened us. He locked us in rooms. When I tried to appear in windows during weddings to get help, I was terrified Mr. Ashford would see me and punish me. He was the one imprisoning us. The other 6 victims provided similar testimony, each describing Ashford's direct role in their trafficking and exploitation. Medical experts testified about the women's injuries and the evidence of systematic abuse. These women were held in conditions of severe deprivation, testified Dr. Patricia Martinez. They were malnourished, injured, traumatized. This wasn't negligent employment. This was deliberate imprisonment and exploitation. Sarah Mitchell testified about finding May in the wedding photos. She explained her editing process, how she'd noticed May in backgrounds, and how she'd recognized that May was signaling distress. When I zoomed in and saw her expression, saw what looked like restraints on her wrists, I knew immediately this wasn't a staff member or guest accidentally in the shot, Sarah testified. This was someone asking for help the only way she could. I called police immediately because I believed someone's life was in danger. Agent Rodriguez testified about the investigation and raid, describing the conditions in which the women were found and the evidence seized. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts, notably in 7 counts of human trafficking, 7 counts of sex trafficking, 7 counts of false imprisonment, forced labor, conspiracy, money laundering, racketeering. Ashford showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, maintaining his facade of dignified innocence, even as he was convicted of horrific crimes. At sentencing, each of the 7 victims provided impact statements. Mayors was particularly moving. Richard Ashford destroyed my life and the lives of 6 other women. He lured us to America with false promises. He imprisoned us. He sold us to men who raped us. He threatened to kill our families if we tried to escape. He treated us as property, not people. For 6 months, I was trapped in that house with no escape. I tried to signal for help during weddings, appearing in windows, hoping someone would see me in photographs and realize I needed rescue. I did this at multiple weddings, always terrified Mr. Ashford would catch me and punish me. I was losing hope that anyone would ever notice me. Then Sarah Mitchell noticed me in her wedding photos. She saw my distress. She called police. Because of her, I was rescued. Because of her, all 7 of us were saved. But Mr. Ashford should have never put us in that position. He should never have trafficked us, imprisoned us, exploited us. He deserves the maximum punishment for what he did. Not just for what he did to us, but to prevent him from ever hurting anyone else. Judge Robert Morrison sentenced Richard Ashford to life in federal prison without possibility of parole, plus an additional 280 years on the various counts. Richard Ashford, you are a predator who systematically exploited vulnerable women for profit. Judge Morrison said, you lured victims to this country with false promises, then imprisoned and brutalized them. You ran a sophisticated trafficking operation disguised behind a legitimate business facade. You showed no remorse and maintained your innocence despite overwhelming evidence. One of your victims, May Chen, tried desperately to signal for help by appearing in wedding photographs taken at your venue. She positioned herself in windows and on balconies, hoping someone would notice her and realize she needed rescue. That took incredible courage and creativity. Fortunately, a photographer noticed and reported what she saw. That photographer's vigilance saved 7 lives. You deserve to spend the rest of your life in prison. Society will be safer with you permanently removed from it. Ashford was led from the courtroom in shackles, convicted and sentenced for his trafficking crimes. The 7 women rescued from Ashford Estate faced long, complex paths to recovery. Each woman's journey was unique, but all shared common challenges: processing trauma, rebuilding lives, navigating legal systems, and finding safety and stability. May Chen's journey. May worked intensively with trauma therapists, specializing in trafficking recovery. The hardest part was trusting people again, May told her therapist, Dr. Maria Santos. I trusted the woman who recruited me in China. She seemed kind and helpful. She destroyed my life. How do I trust anyone now? It's very normal to struggle with trust after being trafficked, Dr. Santos explained. Someone you trusted betrayed you profoundly. Your ability to trust was weaponized against you. Rebuilding that capacity takes time and happens gradually through consistent positive experiences. May was granted a T visa, allowing her to remain legally in the US for 4 years with the possibility of permanent residency. She enrolled in community college to improve her English and pursue a degree in social work. I want to help other trafficking survivors, May explained. I understand what they've experienced because I lived it. I want to use my trauma to help others heal and to prevent other women from being trafficked. May reconnected with her family in China through video calls. Her cousin, who'd reported her missing, was overjoyed to learn May was alive and safe. But May couldn't return to China. There were safety concerns about the traffickers who'd recruited her still operating there. I miss my family terribly, May said, but I can't go back, it's not safe. Maybe someday, when I have permanent residency here, I can bring them to visit me. For now, we have video calls and I'm building a new life in America. Not the life I was promised when I was trafficked, but a real life I'm building for myself. 2 years after her rescue, May was thriving. She'd completed her associate's degree, was working toward her bachelor's in social work, had a part-time job at a refugee services organization, and was volunteering with anti-trafficking groups. Richard Ashford tried to destroy me, May reflected. He wanted to reduce me to a commodity he could exploit, but I refused to be destroyed. I escaped, not physically, but through those wedding photos where I signaled for help. Sarah saw me, police rescued me, and now I'm rebuilding a life Ashford thought he'd taken from me forever. The other survivors, the other 6 women, also received comprehensive support, medical care, therapy, legal assistance, housing, education, job training. Each woman's recovery progressed at her own pace. Richard wanted to return to Vietnam after Ashford's conviction, wanting to be near her family. She received repatriation assistance and continued counseling in Vietnam. Somsri Patel remained in the US, received her T-visa, and found work at a Thai restaurant in Charleston. She struggled with PTSD, but was gradually healing with therapy and community support. Carmen Rodriguez faced additional challenges due to limited English skills but enrolled in ESL classes and job training. She found community through a local church's immigrant support group. Nina Reyes pursued nursing education, inspired by the medical professionals who'd cared for her after rescue. She was determined to become a nurse helping vulnerable populations. Lan Pham, who'd been held longest, had the most severe trauma. She required extensive therapy and struggled with depression, but slowly began healing with comprehensive support. Priya Singh, who'd attempted suicide while imprisoned, received intensive mental health treatment. 2 years post-rescue, she was stable, working and rebuilding her life. Every survivor's journey is different, explained victim advocate Jennifer Martinez. Some recover more quickly, others need more time and support. Some stay in the US, others return home. Some find purpose in advocacy, others prefer privacy. There's no right way to survive trafficking and rebuild a life. We provide comprehensive support and let each woman chart her own path forward. Richard Ashford's prosecution revealed connections to a larger trafficking network operating across the Southeast. FBI investigation of Ashford's communications and financial records led to additional arrests and rescues. Associated traffickers. Evidence from Ashford's case identified 3 recruiters operating in Asia who lured victims with false job promises, 2 transportation coordinators who moved victims internationally, 4 other venue operators running similar schemes, wedding venues, hotels, massage parlors, dozens of clients who'd paid to assault trafficked women. Ashford was part of a sophisticated network, explained FBI agent Rodriguez. Recruiters in source countries identified vulnerable women. Operators like Ashford held and exploited them, and clients paid for access. It's a profitable criminal enterprise built on human suffering. The investigation expanded nationally, coordinating with FBI field offices and international law enforcement. Over 18 months following Ashford's arrest, the connected network was largely dismantled. 23 traffickers arrested. International warrants issued for overseas operatives. Sarah Mitchell, noticing May in those wedding photos didn't just save 7 women at Ashford Estate, Rodriguez said, it opened an investigation that rescued dozens more victims and broke up a major trafficking network. One photographer's attention to detail had ripple effects far beyond what she initially reported. Systemic issues revealed. The Ashford case highlighted vulnerabilities in how luxury businesses can provide cover for trafficking. Ashford ran a legitimate, profitable wedding venue, explained anti-trafficking expert Dr. Jennifer Park. That business provided cover for trafficking. Who would suspect an elegant southern estate hosting beautiful weddings was also imprisoning women? The legitimate business made Ashford seem respectable, gave him reason to have people on property at all hours, explained financial transactions, and deflected suspicion. This pattern was seen in other trafficking cases. Legitimate businesses, hotels, restaurants, spas, event venues, providing facades for hidden exploitation. Law enforcement and regulatory agencies implemented new measures. Training for venue operators, event planners, and hospitality workers on recognizing trafficking. Requirements for venues to have human trafficking awareness materials visible. Anonymous reporting mechanisms for workers or visitors who observe concerning activities. Sarah Mitchell became an unexpected but powerful voice in anti-trafficking advocacy. Her experience noticing May in wedding photos and the subsequent rescue operation made her uniquely positioned to teach others about recognizing and reporting trafficking. Sarah partnered with the National Human Trafficking Hotline and Polaris Project to develop training specifically for photographers and event industry professionals. Photographers see so much, Sarah told a conference of wedding photographers. We're at events for hours, moving through venues, capturing details. We see locations, people, situations that guests might miss. We need to be aware that sometimes what we're seeing includes people in danger. The training Sarah developed taught photographers to recognize concerning signs, visual indicators, person appearing distressed in background of photos, someone trying to get attention while staying hidden, evidence of restraints, injuries, or fear, people dressed inappropriately for setting, individuals who appear controlled by others, behavioral indicators, person who seems afraid or submissive, someone who doesn't speak for themselves, individual prevented from leaving area, person who seems coached on what to say,
evidence of substance abuse or medical neglect, situational indicators, venue areas that seem excessively restricted, security measures inappropriate for business type, people living where they work, multiple people in cramped conditions, evidence of people being monitored or controlled. If you notice any of these signs, trust your instincts, Sarah emphasized. You don't need absolute proof to report concerns. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 1-888-373-7888. Sarah's training reached over 50,000 event industry professionals and directly led to several cases where photographers or event planners noticed concerning signs and reported them, resulting in victim rescues. I never imagined when I became a wedding photographer that I'd end up involved in anti-trafficking work, Sarah reflected. But finding May changed my perspective. Photography isn't just about capturing beauty, it's about seeing, really seeing, and sometimes what we see is someone desperately needing help. Sarah maintained a close relationship with May, who called Sarah regularly and visited her studio. Sarah gave me my life back, May said. She noticed me when I felt invisible. She cared when she could have just edited me out of photos and forgotten about me. Because she paid attention and acted. I'm free. I'll never be able to thank her enough. 5 years after Sarah Mitchell noticed May Chen in the background of wedding photos, the case's impact continued resonating through law enforcement, the event industry, and anti-trafficking efforts. Sarah, now 39, had expanded her photography business, but also dedicated significant time to anti-trafficking advocacy. She'd spoken at conferences nationwide, trained thousands of event professionals, and consulted with law enforcement on using photography and visual evidence in trafficking investigations. 5 years ago, I was just a wedding photographer editing photos, Sarah told an interviewer. Then I noticed something wrong in the background of some images, and my life changed direction. I still photograph weddings. I love that work. But now I also have this unexpected mission of teaching others to see what I saw, to pay attention to backgrounds and details, to recognize when someone needs help. Sarah's training programs had led to 43 documented cases where event professionals noticed potential trafficking situations and reported them, resulting in victim rescues and trafficking prosecutions. Each of those 43 cases represents people who were saved because someone paid attention, Sarah said. That's the legacy of Noticing May. Not just the 7 women at Ashford Estate, but dozens more helped because we raised awareness about looking beyond the focal point. May Chen, now 27, had completed her bachelor's degree in social work and was working for a refugee services organization in Charleston. She specialized in helping trafficking survivors navigate complex systems and access resources. 5 years ago, I was imprisoned, desperate, trying to appear in wedding photo backgrounds, hoping someone would notice me, May reflected. I'd been trapped for 6 months with no escape. I was losing hope. Then Sarah saw me. She recognized I needed help. She called police. Everything changed. May described the 5 years of recovery, the therapy, the legal process, building a new life in America, pursuing education and career, gradually healing from trauma while carrying it forward. I'm not the same person I was before trafficking, May said. That innocent girl from Guangzhou doesn't exist anymore. I'm someone who survived horrible things, but I'm also someone who found courage to signal for help even when terrified. I'm someone who refused to give up. I'm someone building a meaningful life helping other survivors. May had become a prominent voice in anti-trafficking advocacy, sharing her story publicly to raise awareness. She spoke at schools, community organizations, and law enforcement trainings about her experience. I show Sarah's photos, the ones where I appear in windows and on balconies during that wedding, May explained. I point out what I was doing, positioning myself to be visible without being obvious to my captors, trying to show distress in my expression and body language, hoping someone looking at photos later would notice me. It's powerful evidence of how desperately trafficking victims try to signal for help when they can't openly escape or disclose. The other 6 survivors from Ashford Estate had varying outcomes over 5 years. Most had built stable lives, though all carried ongoing effects of their trafficking experiences. 2 had returned to their home countries. 4 remained in the U.S. with permanent residency status. All had received extensive support and were in various stages of recovery. Richard Ashford remained in federal prison, serving his life sentence. He'd exhausted all appeals and would spend the rest of his life incarcerated. The Ashford Estate property had been seized through federal asset forfeiture and sold, with proceeds going to a victim compensation fund. The wedding venue was permanently closed. No couple wanted to celebrate their marriage at a site where such horrific crimes had occurred. The property was eventually purchased by a non-profit organization that converted it into a center providing services for trafficking survivors. There's something poetic about that, May said. The place where Richard Ashford imprisoned and exploited women is now a place that helps trafficking survivors heal and rebuild their lives. The building that represented captivity now represents recovery and hope. A decade after Sarah Mitchell noticed something concerning in the background of wedding photos, the case remained a touchstone in discussions about community awareness, the power of paying attention, and the unexpected ways ordinary people can intervene to save lives. Sarah, now 44, had published a book about her experience, Beyond the Focal Point, How Noticing Details Saved Lives and Changed How I See the World. The book combined her personal story with broader education about human trafficking and the power of observation. 10 years ago, I was editing wedding photos and noticed a woman in the background who looked distressed, Sarah wrote in the book's introduction. That observation, that moment of paying attention to details rather than just the focal subject, led to rescuing 7 women, arresting a trafficker, and exposing a larger criminal network. It taught me that seeing isn't passive, it's active. It's choosing to pay attention, to notice what's wrong, to care about what you've seen, and to act on it. The book became required reading in photography programs and event management courses. Sarah's case study was taught in criminal justice programs as an example of community-based trafficking identification. May Chen, now 32, had been promoted to program director at her organization and had expanded services specifically for trafficking survivors. She'd also gotten married and had a young daughter. My daughter will grow up knowing my story, May said. Not the horrific details, she's too young for that, but she'll know that her mother survived something terrible, that strangers helped save her, and that she's built a good life from that survival. I want her to understand that bad things happen in the world, but good people fight against them. May had written her own book, a memoir titled Invisible No More, How I Signaled for Help Through Wedding Photos and Found Freedom. The book detailed her trafficking experience, her creative strategy of appearing in wedding photo backgrounds, and her decade of recovery. The 2 books, Sarah's and May's, were often read together, providing complementary perspectives on the same rescue, the photographer who noticed, and the victim who tried desperately to be noticed. At a conference marking the 10th anniversary of May's rescue, Sarah and May appeared together on stage, reflecting on a decade since their lives had intersected. 10 years ago, May was imprisoned at a wedding venue, appearing in windows during a ceremony, hoping desperately that someone would see her and realize she needed help, Sarah said to the audience. She couldn't yell or run, or openly escape, so she used the tools available to her wedding photographers, taking hundreds of photos. She positioned herself to be captured in backgrounds, hoping someone would notice her later when editing. I tried this at several weddings, May added, always terrified Richard Ashford would catch me and punish me. Always hoping that maybe, just maybe, a photographer would look carefully at backgrounds, see me, and recognize I was asking for help. Wedding guests didn't notice me. They were focused on the celebration. But I hoped photographers reviewing hundreds of images later might see me. And I did see you, Sarah said. I was editing photos, checking details, examining the full frame. I noticed you in window after window, balcony after balcony. I saw your expression. I saw what looked like restraints. I knew immediately something was very wrong. I called police without hesitation, because I believed someone's life was in danger.
Sarah gave me my freedom, May said, emotional. She noticed me when I felt invisible. She cared when she could have easily dismissed me as an unimportant background detail, because she paid attention and acted. I'm alive and free. Because of her, 6 other women were also rescued. Because of her, a trafficking network was exposed and dismantled. The audience, a mix of photographers, event professionals, law enforcement, anti-trafficking advocates and survivors, gave Sarah and May a standing ovation. The lesson of this story isn't about me being heroic, Sarah emphasized. It's about the power of paying attention. Every person in this room has opportunities every day to notice things that are wrong. Maybe you see someone who seems afraid. Maybe you notice concerning behavior. Maybe you observe something that doesn't quite add up. You have a choice: ignore it or investigate it. May's life depended on someone choosing to investigate rather than ignore. Lives may depend on the choices you make too. And for anyone who might be experiencing trafficking or exploitation, May added, know that people are paying attention. Know that there are individuals like Sarah who will notice if you signal for help. Know that you're not alone, even when you feel invisible. Don't give up. Keep trying to signal. Keep looking for ways to ask for help. Someone will see you. Someone will care. Someone will act. After the conference, Sarah and May stood together, looking at a display of the original wedding photos, the 27 images where May appeared in backgrounds, trying desperately to be noticed. These photos changed both of our lives, Sarah said, looking at the images. For you they represented hope, a creative way to signal distress when you had no other options. For me, they represented a moment of paying attention that revealed something horrific that needed to be stopped. I look at these photos and I see desperation, May said, but I also see courage. I was terrified, but I kept trying. Wedding after wedding, window after window, I kept positioning myself to be photographed. I refused to give up hope that someone would notice me. And I did notice, Sarah said, because I was looking, because I paid attention to details, because I cared about what I saw. They stood together in comfortable silence, a photographer and the woman she'd saved, reflecting on a decade since one desperate signal and one observant eye had intersected to change everything. 10 years, 27 wedding photos, one woman trying desperately to be seen, one photographer who really looked, one phone call that saved 7 lives, 7 women rescued from captivity, one trafficking network exposed and dismantled. Dozens more victims saved through subsequent investigations, an entire industry trained to notice and report, countless people educated about paying attention, one background detail that wasn't ignored, one moment of observation that became action, one story that changed how people see. That was always enough, more than enough, everything. This story is dedicated to every photographer, event professional and community member who pays attention to what's happening around them, who notices when something seems wrong, and who has the courage to report concerns that could help someone in danger. Your awareness protects the vulnerable, and to every trafficking victim, you deserve freedom. What happened to you wasn't your fault, and there are people actively looking for signals that you need help.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.